Speaksies.
So I feel like a hero because I got rid of my Facebook, so I like to gloat about that. Even though it's only been a month, I have gotten off Facebook, and it had to do partially, I think, with the election coming up, but also just I've been off Facebook before and not missed it at all. And I remember that. And I said, let's just get off. But I do miss Facebook for one thing, and that is the birthday notifications.
Oh, very, very helpful and handy.
Yeah, and my move has been, and I'm outing myself here, but you get the Facebook notification, but then I'm not gonna tell you happy birthday on Facebook. I'll text you and say happy birthday.
Right.
And hopefully you don't connect that I only know it's your birthday because Facebook told me.
But you're taking the extra step and effort that in our modern age, you're definitely not going to call anybody because that's way too much energy. No. But you didn't just, like their birthday on Facebook. You took I took a separate step and used another device to send you a message.
That's right. Still impersonal, still digital.
Yeah.
But if somebody texts me happy birthday, I'm like, oh, and listen, I'll take any happy birthday, but I actually don't care that much about birthdays. I don't even usually know when it's my birthday. And, somebody might mention it to me or it's a couple of days coming and I'm like, oh, shoot. Yeah, it is. But I am even worse with other people's birthdays. Steve, I'm real bad at birthdays, remembering people's birthdays. And I'm talking about not just friends, but family members.
Right.
What are you a birthday guy?
I am awful at everything. I looked at my phone the other day and I have alarms set for pretty much every 15-minute segment of every hour of every day, because I'm very forgetful and I get distracted. So I have to set alarms to trigger me to do certain things, to go to meetings, and I live off my calendar. So if it doesn't make it my calendar, and you've known from working with me just with this podcast that if it doesn't end up on the calendar, it's like it never happened.
Steve and I will be on the phone and he'll be like, "Are you good next Tuesday at 8:00 to record?" And I'm like, let me look. Yeah, I should be fine. And it's like, ding. There's a meeting invite, and it's like sent to all my places, which I appreciate. The bad thing is when you're bad at a calendar like I am, I can tell you all day long, yeah, man, I'm good. Put me up for it. But then 45 minutes before I'll realize like I'm booked for 3 things, and I've been doing this my whole life. I'm really bad at it.
You're consistent though.
I am very consistently bad. And I have realized also, recently realized how bad I am with birthdays, and also that me just saying I'm bad with birthdays actually isn't a defense. Like, I'm getting old enough now to realize, like, yeah, so you should probably try to get better.
Right.
As opposed to just, hey, I'm bad at birthdays.
But the first step to addressing a problem is admitting that you have one. So you've done that. I think that's positive.
And sometimes you can't admit you have a problem until you hit rock bottom. So I had my rock bottom moment when it comes to birthday remembrances recently. So it was like Wednesday or Thursday of last week. I get a text from my stepmom, and she says, hey, do you want to come over this Saturday? We're going to grill out. We're going to play some games. And I was like, you know what? Sure. I don't have much going on this Saturday. So I show up. And not only that, I have 2 half sisters also that are much younger. They're teenagers and they're Zoomers, I guess. I thought, let me do something special for them because I don't get to see them that often now with COVID. So I picked up a record for my 17-year-old sister. And for the 15-year-old, I got a book, and I was like, this is kind of nice. I'm going to show up with some gifts for them.
Yeah.
So show up at the house. Everybody says hi. We kind of hang out. So I'm there for about 45 minutes before I realize that there are some presents on the kitchen table.
No.
And then I look and I see there's a card that has my dad's name on it. And I just said, it's November. Dad, is your birthday coming up? And Sandy, my stepmom, said, it's today.
Yeah.
And I realized that I'd showed up to essentially his birthday party with presents for other people, and not even acknowledging that it was his birthday until probably 45 minutes to an hour after I got there. So that was kind of rock bottom. Thankfully, he doesn't care because he's like me, and he's bad with birthdays too. Thank God, because otherwise, I mean, what an ass I am to show up at essentially someone's birthday party not realizing it was their birthday.
There's worse things, but you did show up. and you did bring you had everything there. You had all the ingredients.
Right.
They just were kind of put in a different order.
And I had brought some, and so then the real joke was I had received some pumpkin beer as a gift. And frankly, you should take this as a compliment. I thought about offering it to you because I don't want it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not offering the guy pumpkin beer.
Thank you very much for that.
So I brought over the pumpkin beer and I said straight up, I don't like this. Would you, because I did try one.
Okay.
It was a 6-pack and I mean, it's beer.
Right.
And it was free. It was given to me. So I did try one and it was, for me to take one sip and then dump the rest of it out, it's beer. That's almost a sin, but his pumpkin beer wasn't good. But I basically was like, this isn't good. So then when I found out it was my dad's birthday, I was like, hey, the pumpkin beer. So that actually was worse than not bringing anything.
I was going to say, you had me and you just lost me pretty bad. That descended.
Well, because it was bad, and I appreciate you trying to spin it in a good way, but I needed to really have the catharsis of my rock bottom moment when it comes to birthdays. I guess in to my dad's credit, he did try a sip. Sandy had a glass of it, and he tried a sip, and he was like, no, that's really bad. So I won't name the brewery, but it's not, I will tell you it's not Hardywood.
Good.
So, as far as I know, they don't make any pumpkin beer, so we should be good. All right, well, welcome to Origin of Speaksies. My name is Scott. I'm here along with my good friend Steve. And Steve, you've got some words and phrases for us today, right?
Yeah, I do. And my intent when I started my research for this episode, it's the holidays, the elections are over, things are kind of, people aren't as necessarily, maybe they are a little bit stressed. It's a time for a lighthearted topic. So it's been a while since we did an animal theme show, like 2 weeks actually. So you know how I love to discuss animals.
Right.
So I went to my list, and I won't give the animal away. I'm going to save it for later.
Okay.
But as I started my animal-themed research, I kept coming back to one source that was the opposite of a lighthearted topic. So today we're going to discuss the origins of the term Jim Crow and also Uncle Tom. So if you're looking forward to a light, fluffy episode, maybe this one isn't for you.
Yeah.
So as you know,
this will be interesting. I'm looking. I think Steve, you're just the guy to take us through these.
We'll find out. So as you, I don't know if I think you've mentioned this in passing, but the second episode we recorded, the origin, it was Cakewalk.
Cakewalk, yeah.
And the origins of Cakewalk went back to slavery in America.
Yes.
Which upset me and threw me off so much that we actually had to re-record the whole episode because
we did.
I was off with that. Part of it is it's not a fun subject. The other part is we've recently discussed cancel culture, and I feel like whenever you get in kind of unhappy subjects like this, there's a chance you're going to say something wrong.
Yeah. Well, and it was our second episode too,
right.
So I had lured you into the closet as
where we used to record.
Yeah, where we used to record, and the first one was fairly, although balls to the wall was the first one we ever did. So that was weird already. And then you made it through that one. And the second one, I'm like, and I think too, I didn't deliver it very well, if I remember correctly. Cause I was like, so yeah, it comes back to slavery. And you were like, at least say it like, like don't blurt it out like, like you did. And so, we did it again.
Yeah.
But now you're the one kind of, I don't know, maybe making me a little uncomfortable with these. So, let's hope the audience also
we'll find out.
That up.
So before we get too deep into this, as we mentioned, we recently discussed cancel culture. So I think with this subject, spoiler alert, we're not going to come out in support of anything that you wouldn't think we would. But just in case, we just finished the election season, and a big thing was to have candidates denounce stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what? Let's do a little bit #CYA and do a little denouncing before we get started. So, if you disagree with any of these things I'm denouncing, maybe, give me a hand signal so it doesn't get recorded. Sure. So number one thing I'm denouncing, racism.
Yeah.
Just in case everyone's not clear, don't like racism.
Racism is bad.
Racism bad. Judge people on the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
Yeah, well, Martin Luther King Jr.
And you can see a little ism theme here. Another thing we'll denounce, fascism.
Fascism is bad.
Fascism
is horrible.
Bad.
I'm against it.
Gonna pivot a little bit. Also going to denounce anti-fascism or Antifa. It's funny how fascism and Antifa are supposed to be two different things, they kind of end up being the same thing.
It's the fringes, as I think we talked about in a previous episode.
And for Antifa, I got to give them credit for what they've done to help the spray paint industry and the plywood industry over the last few months, but you're still getting denounced. So keeping with my isms, socialism, denouncing. Communism, denouncing. I think Marxism, is that a thing?
Oh,
well, guess what? You're denounced. Going to spin a little bit. You know, socialism, have you ever heard of something called National Socialism? Mm-hmm. You might have heard of some people called the Nazis.
Yes.
Guess what? Denounced. Denouncing them.
I'm with you.
This is a lot of fun just denouncing
this
stuff
is
here.
Fun.
I could keep
I've
going.
never done this before.
So something that came up recently that was discussed, white supremacy.
Oh, yeah.
Denouncing it.
I denounce it.
Now, are there other supremacies? Like, is there a black supremacy?
I don't think so. I've never heard of it.
Well,
or is there?
Just in case, denounced.
Oh, I'm against that.
So I'm going to denounce all the supremacies because I don't want. And if there's anyone out there, there's like a Welsh supremacist movement or like an Eskimo supremacist movement. I want them going, oh, this is our time to shine.
Yeah.
You're all denounced.
Yeah.
So to be clear as we go through this, if you're offended by anything that comes up, it's unintentional.
Well,
and please refer back to my denounce list. And I got a lot of other stuff. That's just isms.
Real quick, I want to just applaud your courage.
Yeah.
For
taking such a bold stand.
Right. Where are you on murder?
Well, let's see. I don't want to, I want to leave some things up there. I don't want to come out against everything. And again, one last ism, got to finish off. Obviously against Satanism. I don't like kale. I've been very vocal about that, so I don't want that to fall through the cracks.
Oh, boy.
So the first term I'm going to discuss today is Jim Crow. So I've always been familiar with Jim Crow in the context of discussing Jim Crow laws.
Yeah.
But I never knew what Jim Crow was.
Yeah.
Jim Crow laws refers to the systems of laws that basically oppressed black people in America, especially in the South, following the Civil War, leading up to the Civil Rights Movement. They were put under the umbrella of separate but equal, but kept black people from going to the best schools, being allowed to sit where they wanted to. Basically, it was a system of oppression. So the term Jim Crow, though, starts with a minstrel performer who predates the Civil War.
Oh.
The performer was so popular in a song that he had with Jim Crow in the title was so popular also that the term became synonymous with black people and then the laws that held them down and oppressed them. Oh. So while the song is responsible for the term, I've also documented its first use to describe the segregation of black people. Mm-hmm. And while Jim Crow laws are rightfully associated with the South, we're going to talk about how Jim Crow also started in the North. The first use of Jim Crow comes from the North. Wow. So don't let those guys off the hook either. So where does the term Jim Crow come from? So as I did my research, it's pretty well documented. Many sources agree. The first resource I'm going to go to is a website called blackpast.org. The term Jim Crow originates back to 1828 when a white New York comedian, Thomas Dartmouth Daddy Rice, Daddy Rice, Daddy's a nickname, performed in blackface his song and dance that he called Jump Jim Crow. Rice's performance was supposedly inspired by the song and dance of a physically disabled black man he had seen in Cincinnati named Jim Cuff or Jim Crow.
He's really ticking off the bingo chart of offensive things.
Yeah, he's done a pretty good job there. Just starting out, just right out of the gate.
Right. Let's make sure it's on a disabled black guy.
Yeah, it's interesting, not in a good way, but interesting to see immediately with this. A thing we've seen with a lot of slang of things will start with a dance or a song. Something will start with black people, and then white people will come in and take it and put a spin on it. In this case, not necessarily the best spin.
No.
So the song Jump Jim Crow became a huge hit in the 19th century, and Thomas Daddy Rice performed it across the country as Daddy Jim Crow, a caricature of a shabbily dressed African-American man.
Ooh, good times.
Yeah, so
all right.
Great times. So starting right off, going to Encyclopedia Britannica, a little bit more about Thomas Daddy Rice. Rice first introduced a character who would become known as Jim Crow between acts of a play called The Kentucky Rifle, in which he performed a ludicrous off-balance dance while singing Jump Jim Crow, which described his actions. I will get into the lyrics later.
I would like to also say, yes, this is very offensive, obviously. But it also just doesn't sound that entertaining either. Like this type of show where they just kind of, jump around and do slapstick. I don't know. I guess maybe there could be some funny stuff, but we've come a long way since then.
Rice portrayed the character principally as a dim-witted buffoon. In the process, Rice not only created the template for other staple minstrel show characters, but he also fed on, heightened, and popularized pernicious stereotypes of African Americans, even as his presentation reflected white fascination with black culture. And they conclude by saying by the late 1930s, Jim Crow had become a pejorative epithet for African Americans, though arguably it was neither as pervasive or as hostilely derisive as some other terms are.
Okay, so this is before the Jim Crow laws. It was the term Jim Crow came from this guy's minstrel show, and that was a pejorative term that was used.
Right.
And you're saying it wasn't as, I guess, perceived as bad as some of the other stuff that we probably won't want to repeat here.
Yeah.
But it was still...
So I guess in saying that I can say the words Jim Crow out loud and still have a job, as opposed to there's other words that I could say out loud and no longer have a job, nor would I want to say those words. So it starts out that this song and performer becomes so popular that his kind of stereotypical performances of black people then become associated with black people. So there's where it comes from.
Oh, okay. So I feel like an idiot because I know I learned about this stuff and I know what Jim Crow laws are, sort of how you described at the beginning. I thought, man, I can't believe I'm going to say that. I think I thought Jim Crow was an actual person and it had something to do with like some case where, that was decided and then it was Jim Crow laws with all these segregationist laws. Yeah. But not so.
So one of the things that was interesting learning about this is what minstrel shows were. And if you hear that word, I immediately have visions of blackface and exaggerated. This is one of those things you go, man, they really need to bring this back. But at the same time, because of that, you've kind of lost, like, what was it? What was the appeal?
Yeah, I didn't even know until we started doing this podcast. Yeah. I'd never heard that term minstrel show. I didn't even know that was, and if I had heard it, I thought it was like some dude playing an old guitar or something. Yeah. I had no idea it was racist.
So the University of South Florida on their website has a history of minstrelly. And from that describes a little bit what Thomas Daddy Rice's performance was. Quoting from them, like his music, Rice's dance derived from Irish and African styles, but for most northern audiences, the combination was altogether new. While his jig-like footwork marked the rhythm, his arms and hands followed the melody. As the extremely exaggerated and stereotypical black buffoon, Jim Crow, Rice's stunning dance moves quickly inspired a new genre of racialized song and dance, minstrelly, America's first unique artistic genre. Ugh. Rice's imitation of a black man and perpetuation of stereotypes was extremely popular with whites in both the North and South, and Rice became a very rich man.
So I promise I'm not virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Just hearing that makes me kind of sick. I hate, I'm sure you do too. It's just so gross that's what was, that was entertainment.
Earlier I mentioned there's some words, there's certain words that I don't like to say nor would say. And when we look at the lyrics of the song, Jump Jim Crow, the words themselves are not necessarily bad words. Comes to these terms, they're definitely ones like I don't even know if I want to say out loud. But I thought about if I sang it like Michael McDonald. So let's see if maybe this helps a little bit.
This might soften the blow.
Yeah. Come and listen, all you boys and you girls. Come and listen, I just from Tuckahoe. About to sing a little song, my name's Jim Crow. About to sing a little song. We're about to turn about and do just so.
What are we doing?
Every time I wheel about and jump Jim Crow. So I'm not sure if that's better or worse.
I think it works kind of. I don't feel offended.
So,
wow.
To give away just the...
Did I hear Tuckahoe in there? Was that an actual word from the song, or did you remix that?
No, I did not remix it. That's actually from the song.
Well, and if you're not from, just to real quick, if you're not from our area, that is Tuckahoe's in Virginia.
To point out, to get an idea of what sort of stereotypes went on with minstrel shows, instead of saying, I'm just from Tuckahoe, it's I's just from Tuckahoe. Instead of every time, it's every time.
Oh, okay.
There's mention of a fiddle later. It's D-fiddle, things like that.
Well, we have to confront our past, and I think the best way to do that is singing in the voice of Michael McDonald, something that maybe wasn't appropriate years ago.
So, as we stated earlier, Jim Crow became so synonymous with black people that it was applied to laws that oppressed them. So where were the first Jim Crow laws? Now, we know in the South that Jim Crow laws are used to kind of describe the laws that enforce racial segregation, but there was never something, there was never an official something calling this, this is a Jim Crow law.
Oh, I never knew that. I thought I don't know. Again, I don't know that much about the law. I literally thought the laws were called Jim Crow laws.
So to get to the origins where Jim Crow comes from to be applied to law, we're going to go to an article from Time magazine called The Forgotten Northern Origins of Jim Crow. The author of this article is Steve Luxenberg, who wrote a book called Separate, The Story of Plessy versus Ferguson and America's Journey from Slavery to Segregation. So from this article, separation, the word universally used in the 19th century, had no place in the South before the Civil War. Slavery required close contact, cohesion, and intimacy in order to survive and dominate. But it was the free but conflicted North that gave birth to separation in different places and different forms, and at the dawn of the railroad age in the late 1930s. So in the 1930s, there was the prevalence began of trains. So Mr. Luxemburg, in his article, does some research to find the first use of a Jim Crow car. He finds the Salem Gazette, Salem, Massachusetts, October 18th, 1838, less than 6 weeks after the new Eastern Railroad opened for business. So, as he explains, quoting from him again, no existing form of transportation quite compared to a train car's opportunity for throwing together dozens of passengers without regard for status or social group.
So all of a sudden you're faced with, how are we going to deal with this?
And what happened was that they made separate cars for black people, and they became known as Jim Crow cars based on the song.
So that's the first time really you have Jim Crow being used to sort of label a policy, if you will.
Right. And the policy here is listed as separation. So what you're doing, or I guess, the inverse of that, or the same part, separation, segregation. You're taking people apart,
right,
and putting them away. So even though, the South should be rightfully held in contempt for what happened with Jim Crow laws, I always feel like, too, that it's somehow painted like the North was like you went north of Mason-Dixon line and everybody's happy and singing Kumbaya.
Right. Yeah, as usual, it's not that simple.
Yeah, not that simple. And you see this originate with railroads, that separation
that makes
started.
total sense. That's fascinating.
So in conclusion of Jim Crow starts with a minstrel performer, Thomas Dartmouth Daddy Rice, who predates the Civil War. Daddy Rice is so popular that his performance of a song with its stereotypes of black people, the term itself, Jim Crow, becomes synonymous with black people and then with the laws that use to oppress them. Okay. So while the song is responsible for the term, it actually originates with application in Massachusetts of separating or segregating people on train cars. So to conclude, whatever happened to Thomas Daddy Rice?
I was wondering what happened to Daddy Rice.
According to the New Yorker, Daddy Rice was a world-famous stage performer who invented and popularized the black-faced minstrel character of Jim Crow beginning in the late 1830s. He made a lot of money, but was careless with his wealth and died in near poverty in New York City at age 52.
Oh, good.
This is Robert Bankett, host of True Facts with Robert Bankett. True fact: did you know that ants can lift over 5,000 times their body weight? Also, did you know that T. Hollis Mellencamp's sister caused an outbreak of chlamydia that nearly destroyed the German dairy industry?
All right, so today's new slang is one. I went back to the Reader's Digest well, Steve.
Okay.
And actually, this might be my first Reader's Digest. You kind of
welcome.
Yeah, it's good to be a part of the Adrian Appalucci inspired Reader's Digest new slang. So normally I do a new slang that I actually hear my kids saying or kids in general, and I want to know what it means. I'll admit I've never heard this one.
Okay.
So it may not be that prevalent, but I liked it. So I guess spoiler alert there.
All
but,
right.
BTO.
BTO.
So I initially thought that was a Korean boy band or something. There's a lot of things that BTO can stand for as a Bachman Turner Overdrive will always be the real BTO to me.
That's not what it is. The kids aren't talking about taking care of business.
Yeah. TCB.
With BTO.
With BTO. I wish they were. That's a band that, honestly, I don't really care that much for Bachman Turner Overdrive, but you can't deny a couple of their hits.
It's got a good, Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. It's got a really good riff in it.
Black Tie Only. No. Built to Order. A bunch of stuff BTO could be an acronym for. It's kind of boring. But when I saw what it meant, I knew I had to do it. So, Steve, BTO, any guesses from you?
No. If it's not classic rock related at this juncture, I'm going to say I have no idea.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a clue. So the example from Reader's Digest that they gave, how it's used is, my legs are numb from all the BTO I took today. I don't know if that helps at all. Probably not.
I think it made me even more confused. Please share.
Okay, so it stands for bathroom time off.
Oh, okay.
And it's something that runs in my family. So I don't know if you have heard this one. My dad has a couple of nicknames. The main one is just Big Mike. People will say, how's Big Mike?
Yeah.
But there are a select few to this day that still refer to him as Bathroom Break. And the reason for that is back in high school, the church that we went to. So my dad's not a big fan. If you've ever, if you're a churchgoer listening to this, there's the, it's been called the congregational handshake, the greeting time, the time where you kind of
the worst
take
time,
a minute.
Yeah, the worst time of the church service.
I was going to ask how I feel like if I could, you tell me, this is how I think about your relationship with that. Not that I think about it much, but I bet you naturally don't like it, but you man up and you shake a few hands. Yeah. Is that, and you lean
I
into
do that.
It, right?
And I kind of do like a sprinkler thing where I kind of like turn and acknowledge different areas of people. But I turn and I prefer not to have interactions with other human beings, but I fake it.
And I respect that about you. I don't like it either. So my move is to like do the joking shake the hand of the person I'm there with, or you know what I mean? Like kind of like, hey, nice to meet you. I know you could, and like not make eye contact with anyone else. I've matured a little bit. My dad really clearly never liked it. So his move was, as soon as it was time, take a moment to greet, he's out the back. Yeah. And he's heading to the bathroom. So that was not missed by my friends at church. A couple, so Eric and Bianca, friends of mine, it's a bathroom break, because they noticed that he would do that. And I'm like, Dad, you're not slick. Well, I've definitely found myself taking bathroom break time off. I remember working at Maple Tree Pancake House where we both worked. Yeah. And you're just looking at the clock sometimes like, when are we going to get out of here? And I go, you know what? I can kill a couple minutes in the bathroom, just.
Well, that's impressive at the Maple Tree, because they had the hot box. Yeah. That resembled if anyone's ever had a chance to see the movie Bridge Over the River Kwai, when they would lock people in the hot box. It was essentially built right after that. I mean, you could barely move your legs to get in there. Yeah.
And there's one stall, and I remember I'd go in the stall and I'd kill maybe 5 minutes. I don't remember the guy's name. There was one guy in there that lived in a hotel right next. I think he lived in the dirty Seagull Inn or whatever it was. And you'd see him in there with the one ads, just sitting on the toilet, and he'd be like, "Oh man, I can't use the bathroom." But it's something that is a thing. Killing time, taking bathroom time off. My daughter, I think it runs in the family, because she'll strategically disappear if there's like, "Hey, we're gonna rake leaves," or "We're gonna do this." I need to go to the bathroom. Disappear. A few minutes later, you're like, "Where is she?" And she's in there with her tablet or something. So that's what it means, bathroom time off. And it specifically means taking a break during your workday. Again, this is according to Reader's Digest. Yeah. It means the breaks you take during the workday to, quote, go to the bathroom. But instead of just doing bathroom stuff, you're surfing the web, playing Candy Crush, sexting, or otherwise just chilling on the porcelain throne and avoiding your responsibilities.
Right.
So, I know people do this at work, and there's also a little play on words or play on acronyms here. You've heard of PTO.
Paid time off.
Correct. So BTO kind of springs from that also, which is like, hey, people have looked at this and I can get paid for
some time off.
So Urban Dictionary is always going to keep it classy.
Yep.
And this is their definition: bathroom time off. Similar to PTO, personal time off or paid time off. One can easily achieve. I like the use of achieve here.
Yeah.
One can easily achieve 40 hours of additional vacation time by taking a daily 9.23 minute dump at work. That's where the classy part comes in. Executive types and employees with seniority can often increase their BTO up to 60 hours per year by extending their bathroom sessions to 13.85 minutes. So, what do you think about this one as a slang or as an acronym that we could get into the vernacular?
I think it's actually pretty good. As a father who I generally at work, even though now I think about my work as pretty much with everyone else currently in these uncertain times, working at my house, not too much of an issue. But I have found that's the only way as a father. I think it's more of a dad thing. And it was cool you brought your dad up with that, because that's kind of like my move of like one day my daughter finally asked, she's like, what's going on in there all the time? And part of it is, my natural, the circle of life.
Sure.
But another part of it is it's the only place I can be left alone for a few minutes without being asked questions.
Yeah. And the game has changed with having the phone or whatever you have in there with you. Or, I mean, I'm sure, Steve, you only bring a book or Play-Doh or something in there, but yeah, no, it is. So it can extend beyond work. I like it as well. I kind of gave it up at the beginning. Unfortunately, I could only find it online when I was researching it in both Reader's Digest and Urban Dictionary. And Reader's Digest quoted from Urban Dictionary. So this is not really a thing, but I'm saying I want to make it a thing. Yeah. This is probably the first new slang that I've kind of felt like I'm going to spread this. I'm going to use BTO because it's clever and all kidding aside, it's a thing. Like, people heading to the bathroom to get a break. Whether it's home, whether it's work or home.
And hopefully one day people will look back when whoever will do this in the future with their jetpacks and robot cars will come back and see this is maybe the origin of BTO can be traced back to us.
We could be the ones that they cite. It showed up on the Origin of Species podcast. So to wrap up, I'm going to leave you with an article I found. I know I said there were only two sources, but there was an article I found on Huffington Post, so it's good. And the name of the article is "This Calculator Shows How Much You Get Paid to Poop and Pee!" At work. And there is an actual link to a calculator, and you put in how much you make, how long you go to the bathroom, and how much you make while you're in the bathroom. So, for instance, if you make $50,000 and you visit the loo 3 times a day and spend an average of 4 minutes there, you gross $1,250 a year. Not bad for sitting down on the job. So there is actually a calculator that I did not click on because I do feel like that.
And I hope no one at their job has actually gone on that link and then clicked on it too. That would not be good.
Yeah, that'd be a tell.
So after the history of Jim Crow and Thomas Daddy Rice, I was trying to find something to, lighten up, maybe have something a little bit more fun to discuss for my other idiom. Well, I wanted to do that. I failed at it. But when I came across an article on Mediaite.com from election night that inspired me, and I was like, I have to go with our second, not idiom, but I guess the origin of our next phrase. So from Mediaite.com, documenting a discussion on MSNBC the night of the election. Commentator Joy Reid had some comments regarding the Supreme Court if they somehow got involved with the election, which we all know by now was won by Kanye West. Her statement: if somehow they managed to stumble into the Supreme Court, do any of you guys trust Uncle Clarence and Amy Coney Barrett and those guys to actually follow the letter of the law.
So she's calling Clarence Thomas.
She's calling him, our next term, Uncle Tom.
Oh.
All right. I told you it would be fun.
That's a tough one. That is one that I remember growing up, and to me, that term was probably one of the most offensive terms I could think of.
Right.
And if you called a black person an Uncle Tom, I mean, that was fighting words.
Yeah.
It's kind of surprising to hear her use that.
Well, it is, but maybe it's not. So Uncle Tom...
Maybe someone hacked her teleprompter.
So Uncle Tom is defined by Merriam-Webster as a black person who is overeager to win the approval of whites, or also a person who is overly subservient to or cooperative with authority. It originates from Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, a book that was key in promoting the abolitionist cause against slavery. It was also key in raising the stakes so much that it helped make the Civil War happen. Uncle Tom is a key figure in the book. The term, as you could tell by the definition, is generally pejorative. And if you haven't read the book, or if you're like me, you had read it and forgotten about it, the ending, I had forgotten the ending of the book. And you might be surprised how the story of Uncle Tom
I don't remember it either.
ends.
I definitely read it, but...
Well, you'll learn.
I think it's because some of the scenes in that book are so harrowing that the takeaway is those scenes and not so much of the... the moral of the story or the ending.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the book and the author, Harriet Beecher Stowe. So this is from the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center.org, discussing the book. It started as a serial that was published in an abolitionist newspaper, the National Era, ERA. She expected to write 3 or 4 installments, but ended up writing 40.
Wow.
It was published as a 2-volume book. It was a runaway bestseller, 10,000 copies in the United States in its first week, 300,000 in the first year, and in Great Britain, 1.5 million copies in 1 year. According to Harriet Beecher Stowe Center, in the 19th century, the only book to outsell Uncle Tom's Cabin was the Bible.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, okay, help me with the time frame here. So this is 19th century.
So Uncle Tom's Cabin was published in 1852.
And I'm trying to think what was going on around that time.
Well, it's at the time where, in the years leading up to the Civil War, the idea of, slavery was becoming untenable. Yeah. And I think a big inspiration was the Fugitive Slave Act, which allowed, a law that basically if a fugitive slave escaped from the South and up in the North, they could still be brought back.
Yes. Okay. And so this helps a lot with understanding why this would have been so popular and sold that many copies. Makes total sense.
So Uncle Tom's Cabin tells the story of Uncle Tom, who was sold as a slave from one family to another when the original family that had enslaved him had to pay some debts off. Uncle Tom is a very saintly character, he's described as. He is, towards the end of the book, there are some slaves that have run away, and the brutal Simon Legree, which is a name I had forgotten. It's a name I hear and I remember as a villain, but couldn't remember where it came from. The book concludes basically with Tom being beat to death by Simon Legree, because he wouldn't give up the information where the runaway slaves had gone.
Oh, so Tom gets beaten to death?
Yes. So that's actually the conclusion of the book.
Okay. I remember Simon Legree beating the bejesus out of people, but I didn't remember that he died at the end. So he was the hero of the book, or the fact that he was able to not rat out. So it doesn't make sense that it should be a good thing to be called an Uncle Tom.
Well, you would think, but let's learn about when it became a pejorative.
And as those words were coming out of my mouth, I was like, that's probably the first time in the history of the show that I'm like, that's really would be bad used out of context. Yeah. So anyway, we'll keep it in though.
So before we actually talk about when the term Uncle Tom became a pejorative, one of the things I found that was interesting was what is called anti-Tom literature. Uncle Tom's Cabin was actually a very huge influence in causing the Civil War, and the response and reaction to it generated such passion that, especially in the South, there was a whole cottage industry of what was called anti-Tom books.
So at first, when you said that, I was thinking like some really nuanced literary criticism, but this is not that.
nuance would not be the term. This is the subtlety of Rudy Ray Moore.
Yeah. Oh,
coming up. So here's some sample titles from Wikipedia. White Acre versus Black Acre.
What the hell?
Ellen or the Fanatic's Daughter.
Oh, gosh. I don't even want to know.
Have you ever gone to Redbox and like a movie will come out and you see like a knockoff title that like they were trying to like make it, it's not Frozen. It is The Very Cold Princess.
Yeah.
Related, Uncle Robin in His Cabin in Virginia.
Oh my gosh.
Aunt Phyllis's Cabin or Southern Life as It Is.
For Aunt Phyllis. So these books were, and I'm sorry if you've got some more. I want to hear all of them. But so essentially, this was Uncle. It accomplished two things for these guys. It was they wanted to sell some books because of how popular Uncle Tom's Cabin was, but also it literally says in the title, setting things right, or like the way things were actually in the South. So pretty much saying like, this is not the way things are.
Yeah, and I think it was it shows the power of the book that caused such a reaction to make a whole cottage industry dedicated to taking the book out.
Well, it'd be like after The Godfather came out, if a bunch of like Italian Americans were, started making movies called like the Dawn of, New York or whatever,
He really does make olive oil. Something like that.
It's they raise oranges or whatever.
Yeah. So when did Uncle Tom become a bad thing? So we're going to go to an interview from NPR entitled Why African Americans Loathe Uncle Tom. It's an interview with Professor Patricia Turner, who I believe is a doctorate in African American Studies at University of California, Davis. And according to Professor Turner, many African Americans don't hate the real story that Stowe wrote. The Uncle Tom character that she gives us is extraordinarily Christian. The climax of the story really comes when Uncle Tom is asked to reveal where two slave women are hiding who had been sexually abused by their master. And he refuses. Knowing that he's going to be beaten to death, he refused to say where they are. And African Americans who read the novel can appreciate what kind of heroism that took for a black man to sign away his life to save two black women. Mm-hmm. So one of the things, the elements that she notes in her interview that helped make this a term that's pejorative is something that was called Tom shows. So afterwards, when the book was very famous and it created a series of plays that went. Mm-hmm. And according to this interview, what seems to two things conflated. One, the ending's not very happy. So the ending was changed to have more of a happy ending without the lead character being beaten to death.
Interesting.
And two, minstrel shows started to pick up. Thomas Daddy Rich comes back again. Quoting from her, if they could sell tickets as they had been successful by showing blacks in minstrel depictions, showing them liking to dance more than they like to work, showing their insensitivity to each other, showing their willingness to tell the master or mistress what he or she wanted to hear. So part of it, the change was after the book's popularity, Uncle Tom, instead of being a melodramatic play, became a little bit more of a minstrel show. And I think another reaction was, as years went by, reactions to dealing with prejudice went more from a little more passive to more of an aggressive stance.
So in this transition from the book in popular culture to these shows, I'm assuming it sounds like Uncle Tom starts to become not the hero anymore. He becomes a bad. Yeah. So now he's like a bad name to be called based on the not true translation of the story.
Right. And I think a lot of some other things I've seen that kind of typical, like very bad minstrel show sort of stereotypes. For instance, the Mammy character seemed to have originated from these shows too. So I could say that. But I think a big change was just the change from addressing racial equality, not from a kind of Christian suffering way, but more of an aggressive way.
I gotcha.
So quoting from an article from New Yorker magazine, changing sensibilities about race also took a toll on the novel's prestige. James Baldwin excoriated Stowe in his 1949 essay, Everybody's Protest Novel, not least for her depiction of Uncle Tom as a Christ figure, suffering and dying at the hands of Simon Legree. Baldwin objected to the suggestion that blacks be passive in the face of white violence. So as you see kind of culture changes, I think Uncle Tom became, not as much of the idea of Christian suffering to address things. And also, too, I think another big influence in this is I don't think anyone reads this book anymore. I had read it. I remember reading it as I was younger, but there's no way that you could get me, if I was a teacher right now, in our current climate to have this book out there and have this discussion. It's dynamite and you're lighting the match.
Yeah. But it's interesting to note and clarify, just like with the Jim Crow phrase and term that we learned about earlier, the truth behind it, which is for this. If you would have asked me before this episode, and I did read it, but if you would have asked me what was Uncle Tom's role in the book, it would have not have been that. It would have been, he's snitching on the
right,
or he's not taking the side of his fellow slaves,
right?
Just based on the connotation that the term has. I do have to tell you something. So back in college, or actually it was the summer before college, we went to the youth group, the same youth group from the church where Mike McGinnis bathroom break, my dad got his nickname. We went to Southern California, and then we went down to Mexico for a missions trip. We stayed for a week in Southern California in this huge house with these people, and they were very well off. And I learned that they were early on in they were one of the first people that sold, I guess it was Avon, or it was one of those. I can't remember one, but they were at the top of one of those pyramid
so they got
schemes.
a top of a pyramid. That's awesome.
Yeah, they were. What's the other one? It's not Avon. It's soaps and stuff.
Mary Kay.
Not that one either. It's the one people give presentations for, Amway.
Amway, okay.
And we stayed there for a week. So I remember being in there, taking a shower, and everything they had was Amway. And that's apparently where they got their money. But I also noticed they had a bunch of beech nut candy all over. This was a huge house. Like it had big rooms with I know sometimes with growing up not having a ton of money, say a big house, it just means like a 2-story house. But they had big rooms with pool tables and this amazing pool that like had a hot tub with it and like foam. It was amazing. And their last name was Beecher. Not to give up, I guess, too much, but and the son, who was a couple years older than us, told us that they were descendants of Harriet Beecher Stowe, and that's why they had all the beech nut candy, because she was also a founder of Beech Nut. Well, I've believed that, and I've told people that for a long time. Have you even heard of Beech Nut? You remember Beech Nut? Okay. Whatever that brand is.
But it's like the really cheap gum. It's like the 5-cent. I can like envision it. It's like the gum, like if you didn't have enough change and you needed gum, that's what you would get.
Totally. It's like the, what was the name of the Tom, not Uncle Tom's Cabin? Like that's the Lifesavers. And then the real story of Tom books that you were talking about is the Beech Nut version of it, or the knockoff. But anyway, I am just now realizing, because right as we were getting ready to do this, I did a quick Google search of Harriet Beecher Stowe and Beech Nut, and it's like, there's nothing. I'm like, wait, what? I'm doing Harriet Beecher Stowe and candy, and all of a sudden I'm realizing how ridiculous it is that for the past, 20 years, I've believed that Harriet Beecher Stowe invented Beech Nut candy, and it's not even the same last name, but I don't know if they were really the descendants or not, but all this time I've believed that I spent a week with the great-great-great-grandson of Harriet Beecher Stowe. I also believed that I was a direct descendant of Pocahontas and told everybody that until I got to college. And every third person had the same story. I think that was one of those things there was a certain generation where you said that you were related to some famous person. So I fell for it. So anyway, that's my not connection to this whole story.
Maybe you should write a counter novel to that story. So if I could share just a few more, if you don't mind.
Please.
Frank Freeman's Barber Shop. Don't know. Little Eva, the Flower of the South.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like that could be a whole lot of
I'm interested
different
in
sort of things. Mr. Frank, the Underground Mail Agent.
Time out. Wasn't it just Frank somebody's barbershop? And then now it's
Frank Freeman's Barbershop.
Frank Freeman's Barbershop. And now this is, what's this one?
Mr. Frank.
Mr. Frank. Okay.
Comma, the Underground Mail Agent.
When did the Underground Railroad happen?
I don't know.
But this sounds
Mr.
like
Frank, I might have to check that one out. And finally, tit for tat.
Okay. I'm going to stay away from that one.
Yeah, we should. So speaking of things we should have stayed away from, to summarize Uncle Tom, in conclusion, Uncle Tom changed from a heroic character to being used for someone to denigrate someone.
Right.
I mean, as attitude changed, Uncle Tom didn't fit the narrative.
Yeah.
And I think it's been lost now in the past because people don't read this book anymore. And it's a term that I don't like for a variety of reasons. One, I don't know a context in which I could say, I could use that term.
I thought you were leading the charge now to bring Uncle Tom back as a positive term.
Yeah.
That's not
I don't feel like I have enough wherewithal to just be in front of a microphone and say something like, if you vote for Trump, you ain't black.
True.
You have to be a pretty pompous white person to say something like that.
You would be.
But I think what kind of summarizes why I don't like it is the way that Joy Reid used it. It's a way to dismiss someone, and we've talked a lot about this year, with virtue signaling, claiming to be red-pilled, or accusing people of gaslighting you. It's a term to dismiss people.
Yeah.
And I don't like it I think for that reason, it's a way to attack people without addressing anything, without having an argument. It's
it's terrible. And the way that it was specifically used there against Clarence Thomas is rough.
Pretty good example. Reading this, though, I was glad to actually remember the book and to see that, Uncle Tom was a heroic character. And hopefully, maybe the more that people know that, maybe this term won't be used to disparage people, or just really won't be used. It's unnecessary.
Yeah. So you know the history now. Let's put it to bed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to Origin of Speaksies. That's our show today. Steve brought the history and the knowledge, and I definitely learned something there. By the way, if you want to learn something, or I don't know if you'll actually learn something, but maybe you'll have a laugh or two, follow our Instagram @Speaksies. And we also have a Twitter account @Speaksies. And we'd love for you to follow us there. Reach out to us if you have any ideas for show topics, or you just want to give us a little love, or hell, even if you get a little drunk and want to give us a call, you can go to @Speaksies and see the phone number there, because I don't remember it. So, Bob's your uncle.
Watch out for bears, and kale is from the devil.
Speaksies.